Good morning, members. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Bills Committee on Basic Housing Units Bill. First of all, I thank members for supporting me to preside over the meeting. Item 1, election of Deputy Chairperson. A notice has been sent by the Secretariat notifying members that by the close of the nomination period, only one valid nomination was received. That's Ms. Rebecca Chan. She was nominated by Dr. Wendy Hung and seconded by Mr. Scott Leung. According to paragraph 8 of the ROP, when there is a valid nomination, we can decide whether we elect a deputy chairperson. It is agreed. I announce Ms. Jovi Chan elected as the deputy chairperson of the Bill Committee. Congratulations. Item 2, meeting with the administration. I now invite government officials to come in. In a moment's time, the administration will present to members contents of the bill by way of a PowerPoint presentation. You may now press the button if you would like to speak concerning the policy matters of the bill. The floor will be open to you. Each of you will have 4 minutes, questions and answers included. Now, the legal advisor has also scrutinized the bill, and some questions have been raised by the legal advisor concerning the bill's contents. During the clause-by-clause scrutiny, I will invite the legal advisor to join in. Another matter to be dealt with. What do you think is appropriate in consulting the public's views? Please raise your hands. Reverend Peter Kuhn and Mr. Kenneth Leung. Chairman, I propose that we solicit public submissions in writing. Kenneth Leung and Mr. Vincent Zhang. I agree, many views have been raised by different bodies already. Now, according to the LSD report, page 1, since the establishment of the task force on tackling the issue of SDU, since October 2023, stakeholders have been consulted. Between December last year and February this year, a total of 40 consultation sessions and meetings have been held with 700 political parties, stakeholder groups, and so on. Some 2,000 public submissions in writing have been received. So I believe the administration has met in person with many representative groups. So in accordance with members' views, we will invite the public to submit written submission to the Bills Committee to express their views. Secretary, are the figures that I quote correct? Yes. Now let me introduce the government officials in attendance today, and then we will begin in earnest. In attendance today, we have Ms. Winnie Ho, Secretary for Housing, Ms. Winnie Wong, Deputy Secretary for Housing, Mr. Jason Chen, PAS for Housing. We also have from the DOJ, Ms. Carrie Lee, Senior Assistant Law Draftsman, and Ms. Annis Lai. We also have Mr. Eric Lee, Senior Building Surveyor from the Housing Bureau. Secretary, please give us a few words. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members. I would like to start off by thanking LegCo members, especially members of the panel on housing, for your invaluable views. So that's in dealing with the issues of substandard subdivided units and also the BHU regime, we can tailor our policies to meet the public's needs. This term of the government has been investing a lot of resources to build public housing units. In the next 10 years, there will be 30,000 public housing units provided, including 21,000 transition housing units and 30,000 light public housing units. This is how we can deal with the deep-rooted issues of SDU. We have never neglected the complexity of the issues. That's why we have consulted the public on numerous occasions. I thank organizations and social welfare organizations for their constructive views. We are determined to analyze and incorporate these views into the legislative framework. Now, this bill seeks to provide for a legal framework so that operators who would like to continue to operate subdivided units will have some standards to follow. We will fully cooperate with the work of the Bills Committee. We hope that the bill will be passed as soon as possible. We target commencing the BHU regulatory regime on the 1st of March next year so that we can finally bid farewell to substandard SDUs. We want to eradicate substandard SDUs at root. I will defer to my colleague for the details of the bill. Ms. Winnie Wong. Thank you. I will now explain the contents of the bill. First of all, the structure. There are 11 parts, 96 clauses, and 4 schedules, setting out the regulatory scope, registration system and grace period, as well as the minimum standards, recognition system, appeal mechanism, and the relevant penalties and offenses. Now, the regulatory scope. In Part 1, we specify that for the definition of subdivided units, it is the flags in domestic buildings or domestic portion of composite buildings. In other words, flags in commercial portion of composite buildings, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, and illegal structure, as well as new territories exempted houses divided into more than one self-contained unit, these will not be covered under the BHU regulatory regime. The relevant departments will enforce the law according to existing legislation and lease. The definition of subdivided units. A residential flat is subdivided using partition materials, such that its layout becomes different from the ones as shown on the reference building plan, and results in 2 or more wholly or substantially enclosed compartments, designed for each being the subject of a separate domestic tenancy. Registration system. The period is 12 months, starting from the 1st of March next year to the 28th of February 2027. For flags with pre-existing SDUs, they will be allowed to register. Now, it means that on the date of Gazetted, or 3 months before the Gazetted, there is at least one valid lease for SDU for the flag. Fee for application will be waived completely. After registration, the operator can enjoy a 36-month grace period from the 1st of March 2027 to the 28th of February 2030, so that the operators may conduct alteration work and apply for registration for the SDU. The registration period and the grace period will be 48 months long in total as a transitional arrangement. However, during that period, if there are imminent risk or threat to life or properties posed by the flags, the Secretary for Housing can cancel the registration and order that the lease be cancelled on the very date, and the tenants may file a claim for 3 months rent compensation or compensation equivalent to the remaining rent. Now, to complete the registration soon, we have two measures. First of all, in the first 3 years of registration, we will launch an early bird discount to waive or reduce the application fee. So the earlier an application is made, the more reduction you can enjoy. And also there is a countdown period. That is during the 6-month period prior to the expiry of the grace period, from the 1st of September 2029 to the during that period, we will not allow any new domestic tenancy for unrecognized SDUs in the registered flags. Now, from the date of Gazetted until the countdown period starts, all the tenancy for registered SDUs will also be suspended or cancelled. Recognition system. On the 1st of March next year, we will launch the recognition system in tandem to receive application. Each SDU can apply for independent or separate recognition. In submitting the application, there must be an audit report signed off by a specified professional to ensure that the SDU meets the minimum living standard, living conditions, and that all statutory orders, directions, or notices have been complied with. Now, in Schedule 3, we specify that specified professionals include registered architects, engineers, and surveyors. Recognized and up-to-standard SDUs will be granted a BHU recognition with a validity period of 5 years. On renewal application, a new audit report must be submitted to ensure that the SDU still meets the minimum standard. Recognized BHU, if subsequently found to be substandard, a ratification notice may be issued by the Secretary for Housing to the operator to require ratification within a specified period. Failing that would be an offense. The Secretary for Housing may cancel the recognition of the BHU. By the same token, if the recognized BHU poses imminent threats or risk to life or properties, the Secretary for Housing may also cancel the recognition, and the tenancy would end on the very day that the recognition is cancelled. Schedule 2 of the bill sets out the details concerning the fees for applying for recognition. For each SDU, it is $3,000. With a 5-year validity period, that means $600 per year or $50 per month. On renewal, it is $2,400. Now, this slide is the timetable for the early bird arrangement. In the first 6 months of the registration, that is between the 1st of March next year to the 31st of August next year, all the applicants will enjoy a 3-year fee waiver. The full fee, $3,000, will have to be paid starting from the 4th year. Now, between the 1st of September 2026 and the 28th of February 2027, that is the 7 to 12 months of the registration period, applicants may enjoy full waiver for the first 2 years. For the 3rd year, half waiver. The 4th year, full fee. Now, for other SDUs, the first year is free, and then there will be 50% concession for the next 2 years. On the fourth year, a full fee is required. We also set out the minimum standards for living environments. We have set out the major principles in the bill. In terms of the relevant details, the Secretary for Housing will formulate a set of code of practice to set clear guidelines for the trade. There are 8 categories. During the consultation period and also the meeting with the panel in March, those have been discussed, and I will not go into the details here. Next, major offenses and penalties. Now, the major offense is offense of illegal letting of SDUs. Now, after the registration period, starting from the 1st of March 2027, if there are 2 or more subdivided units in a flagged for independent lease, but without valid registration and recognition, the lease would be illegal. And also, during the countdown period, that is between the 1st of September 2029 and the 28th of February 2030, despite enjoying the grace period with the recognition, if a new lease is entered into by the operator for the flags, that is also an offense. Upon summary conviction, the operator would be subject to a maximum of level 6 fine, that is $100,000 or 2 years imprisonment. For indictment, the maximum penalty is $300,000 and imprisonment of 3 years. There are also other offenses. For example, notification requirements when there is alteration. Failing that, there would be a level 4 fine, $25,000. And also, on application, there may be misleading or false representations or statements. And the Secretary for Housing may require the applicants to submit further information. Failing that, it would be an offense subject to a maximum of level 6 fine, $100,000 and imprisonment term of 2 years. Appeal mechanism. We have made reference to other similar regulatory regime. The Chief Executive would appoint an appeal panel. The chairperson must be a person eligible to be appointed as a district court judge under District Court Ordinance Cap 336. Professional members include professionals from the legal and architectural sectors and also scholars. Now, when there is, if an appeal is to be filed, it must be filed within 30 days after the decision is made. The decision of the appeal panel is final. Law enforcement. Now, since substandard SDU is a problem affecting hundreds of thousands of households, the government will adopt a pragmatic and human-centric approach. After the end of the registration period, that is the 1st of March 2027, we will enforce the law in an orderly manner concerning the illegally let out SDUs. To ensure tenants' accommodation security, we will arrange for social worker teams to help assist them to find other accommodations in the market. We will also make use of our resources like transitional housing, light public housing, and temporary accommodation center to provide temporary accommodation for the affected tenants. We will also add a Category C tenants under our transitional housing regime to provide temporary housing for affected tenants. Now, I emphasize that if affected tenants are waiting for public housing allocation, they will not be given priority even when they are affected by the enforcement actions. Now, timetable. Subject to the passage of this bill, we will start the publicity campaign in the 4th quarter of this year. Starting from the 1st of March next year, we will begin accepting application and start offering recognition. The grace period will start on the 1st of March 2027 and enforcement will begin in tandem. The 1st of September 2029 will be the start of the 6-month countdown period. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lam. I now open the floor to members. Reverend Peter Douglas Kuhn will start, and each member will have 4 minutes for both questions and answers. Thank you, Chair, and I also thank the administration for the very detailed presentation and also the Secretary's introduction. I've got a few questions for the administration for clarification. First is about the administration's long-term housing policy. Now we have the basic housing unit, BHU, this time, and very soon some people will move on to other housing mode. I'd like to know whether our public finance is able to afford this, because I believe about 40% of the community live in public housing. I'm not just talking about the construction costs, the management and rates are also paid by the government. I'd like to know whether the government can afford all these given our financial situation. Otherwise, our housing situation may improve, but we may encounter problem in public finances. So I'd like the administration to clarify on this. Another point is just an opinion. Can the administration analyze the profile of SDU households? This is important. Why are they living in SDUs? Are we talking about the elderly or new arrivals? Because this is relevant to our solution to this problem. Otherwise, we will be stuck with this problem forever. Secretary. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Reverend Kuhn, for the questions. First, on our housing strategy, we have a 10-year basis for our long-term housing strategy, renewed every year or updated every year. So we have about 308,000 public housing units to cope with the demand, and this is a figure arrived at after our research in our long-term housing strategy. We've taken into account inadequate housing and also the applicants on the waiting list of public housing that would be moved to public housing after we have enough supply. We have 110,000 SDUs. About 40% of them are eligible for public housing, i.e. they are on the waiting list. About 20% of them will become eligible persons in the future. For instance, they have yet to live in Hong Kong for 7 years. Gradually, they will become eligible for public housing. For the remaining 40%, they will be in the SDU market forever. For instance, they have exceeded the asset and income limits of public housing, but then because of family or their employment needs, they want their separate housing. Hopefully, in future, there will be issues for people who need housing but not eligible for public housing. So in the coming 10 years, we have sufficient supply of public housing. We have set out clearly the supply of public housing in the coming 5 years and the 5 years that follow on our website. While people are waiting for public housing, we want to improve their living situation. So we have 30,000 light public housing as well as 21,000 transitional housing units for them. So we have a very comprehensive long-term housing strategy to cater for the needs of the community. So among the 110,000 SDUs, the profile is we have 1 to 2P households. They account for the majority of the inhabitants. About 66% of the SDUs are 1 to 2P units. So our design of LPH and TH more or less copy this mix, and about 20% of them are elderly persons. Our research has confirmed the needs of these people, and we will have social working teams set up, and for people who are eligible for LPH or PH, we will help them to apply. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chan Sing. Thank you, Chair. The Secretary has gone the full sets of data for PH and LPH, but we have 110,000 SDUs. About half of them may be phased out of the market. Do you have really enough SDUs for rehousing? Because your approach in enforcement is to cater for the market situation of SDUs. That means you are not really that confident that you have sufficient units to rehouse the inhabitants. And if the supply of PH or BHUs are not sufficient, you may not enforce the law so vigorously. For instance, can you use idle school premises for rehousing so that you can be more confident in enforcement? And according to your paper, if the unit is well decorated or renovated, but there might be risks and hazards in the building, and the building or the BHUs will not be eligible for recognition. I'd like to know the extent of risks you are talking about. You talk about those tenement buildings built before the war, or some of them may already be historic buildings. Will there be saltwater buildings there? And there may be buildings that have not complied with the mandatory housing inspection order. Now, a decade or so ago, there was a building that collapsed in Kowloon City, and about half of the SDUs have not submitted their notice of tenancy, so you don't have the full picture yet. Will that impact on your future enforcement? Thank you. First, about the figures. The study itself is most important. Now, what is the situation of these 110,000 SDUs, and also the minimum standards we propose? Now, we have an IFA requirement of at least 8 million or 8 meter squares, about 30,000 units involving about 10,000 units. So some will at least have 10,000. Now, one flat may be divided into 2 to 3 SDUs. So if they're required to be rectified, at least we'll have one such unit. So about 20,000 SDUs may require more alteration works. And so among the 30,000, we will at least have 10,000. That means we have 70,000 yet. That means in the market, we will have 80,000 recognized BHUs. So among the 110,000 SDUs that are of high quality, I believe very soon they'll be able to be recognized through a professional. Mr. Lam mentioned vacant school premises. We have been looking for suitable ones. Take public light housing example. 4 to 5 of them are to be located in renovated vacant school premises. And for common areas or public areas with structural hazards, for instance, if there are serious hazards with the structural safety of the building, I believe a repair order would have already been issued by the buildings department. And then if there is serious obstruction of fire escapes, putting threats to life and property, then recognition will not be granted. And under the SDU ordinance, we have an notice AR2. Over 60,000 of the 110,000 SDUs have already returned their AR2. We're worried that some AR2s may not have been submitted, and if they come for recognition, then their situation may be exposed. So we have discussed with the IRD, or Rating Evaluation Department. We will be lenient. We will encourage them to come forward to register it first. If AR2s have yet to be submitted, they should state when AR2s would be submitted and when registration and recognition will be done, and the RV deal will be lenient. No prosecution action will be taken, and they'll be given a grace period. Mr. Teck Chi-yun. Thank you, Chair. And I also want to thank the Secretary for her efforts in addressing our housing issues. The BHU bill is a good move to improve the quality of SDUs, but then the residents are worried that they will have to foot the bill in the future. Because in upgrading the standard of SDUs, costs are involved. There is no subsidy from the government at all, so the costs are bound to be transferred to local residents. I don't want the grassroots to be displaced from BHUs, and you said that no SCU residents will be rendered homeless. But then many of the residents are elderly persons, some are new arrivals, and they may be living in a flat with $5,000 that costs $5,000 in rent. They cannot afford better housing. They can only afford SDUs with rent at $2,000. So in future, they will be no better off. The Secretary talked about many new housing schemes such as TH and LPH. But then residents can only stay here for a limited period. So how can you ensure that there is smooth transition? And you talked about a local or short-term accommodation or short-term rehousing. Would people be confident that they can be rehoused in public housing in due course? Do you have a comprehensive plan? Now, in the coming 5 years, SDUs may be eradicated, but what about the timetable in the provision of public housing? Will there be seamless transition for these people? And you do not have any tenancy control for BHUs. After the SDUs have been improved, rents will also increase. Many organizations have expressed their concern. Do you have any rent control for BHUs? Thank you. Before, we had LPH and TH. And when PH were not being produced in the quantity we see nowadays, indeed, rent of SDUs have been driven up to about 5,500 per SDU. But we have very clear objectives and clear production timetable for the coming 5 years and also the 5 years that followed. We've already got 18,400 LPHs. The turnover rate has reached 164%. 70%, meaning 70% of them have been returned for a second batch of residents. And the 21,000 LPH in Yunnan already occupied, and then 2,300 units in Choi Yun are being issued with occupation permits. So the situation is very different from what it was in the past. We have such a great supply of LPH and TH with much cheaper rent. Very soon you will hear that people with housing needs are moving to LPH or TH. There has been major adjustment in the supply and demand of the SDU market. Now, if you compare the figures now and the year before, there's been a 2% drop in the rents of SDU. Correspondingly, there's been 8% increase in rent in the private market. So when we have enough supply, the rent will drop. So we have a 4-year period counting the registration and grace period. There will be ample time for us to catch up in terms of supply to allow choices for people. And as for the supply of LPH and TH, some plots are on loan from the private sector. Some are government land. We believe we'll be able to use such lots for longer. Take Choi Heng as example. It is for the extension of a service reservoir. We do not see any short-term need for the site. So we're quite confident that some of the LPH and TH units can be used for a longer period of time. Mr. Kenneth Leung, I want to thank the administration for its efforts in coming up with the details of the BHU bill so soon so that we can discuss it today. I've got a few questions for the administration. Now, in para 9 of the LegCo brief, now if a residential flat is subdivided using partitions such that its layout becomes different from the one as shown on the reference building plan, then it is an SDU. Now, we have got flats that are rented to such as students. So, for instance, the sitting room is divided into two, together with 2 bedrooms. It has become a flat with 4 SDUs. I'd like to know whether you can regulate such flats as well. Regarding the regulatory regime proposed, you have some incentive scheme for the recognition fees. Now, you told us that $3,000 will be charged as a recognition fee. In fact, it is just to cover the administrative cost. Can you change the name? Because I'm afraid that this will lead people to have the misunderstanding that $3,000 is the full cost for recognition. In fact, it's just the fee for recognition, and they have to pay for professional services as well. So can you change the name to avoid misunderstanding? And in former consultations, there were worries expressed whether you have sufficient professionals. Will fees be jacked up because there is a great demand for such manpower in the market? So you've already increased the number of professionals for structural safety and fire safety. I'd like to know the increase in manpower. For instance, has the manpower been doubled from 2,000 to 400 so that we can be confident that you have sufficient professionals in the market to meet the demand?
Secretary, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung. In our construction plan, we have to use the latest approved plan as the foundation. If the plan is not altered, that is, if the construction is according to the original plan, that is, for instance, the unit has one living room and then one bedroom, and if that bedroom has become vacant, for instance, the child has grown up and left, then they let out this room for tenancy. That's all right. That's no problem. Well, even if they have changed the floor plan, for instance, they do a rebuilding of the rooms, even if they have changed the internal plan, if the tenancy is only for one period, then it will not be regulated. Otherwise, it will fall in our regulatory regime. As for the registration or recognition fee, we do have to make further explanation. For instance, there would be a professional fee and so forth. As for the number of professional people on the panel, we have increased 2 additional categories. Before adding these 2 categories, we had 7,000. And now that with 2 new categories, for instance, professionals or engineers from with a fire safety background, the number has become 8,000. Next, Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Chair. Well, through this regulatory regime, we will have better living conditions for people, and I'm fully in support of that. We also have the grace period, and the administration has been very thoughtful, knowing that all parties need some time for adaptation and also perhaps alteration works. I have a few questions regarding the details of the regime. First, in the paper, you mentioned that there will be a kind of rectification or verification period, and there will be random checks on the altered flats. I'd like to ask the Secretary which department will be in charge of these site visits. It actually affects the outcome. If it is under the Housing Bureau or the Housing Department, I think they are fully stretched. Do they have enough manpower to do these kind of site visits? And second question, there will be a specified website. I'd like to know when this website will be ready. Third question, there will be the issue of rectification notice if the units is not up to standard. I'd like to know whether these notice will be put on the website, because some households may not understand the arrangements. If they rented in one of these substandard units, they will find it very troublesome. So I'd like to know whether this kind of rectification notice will be uploaded onto the website so that the prospective tenants could check and to avoid renting this kind of substandard flats. Thank you, Dr. Hong, for your questions. First, about random site visits. Yes, it will be under the Housing Department, under the leadership of Ms. Wong. We will arrange enough manpower to do these site visits. We know that they have very heavy workload. They have to check different buildings. We would take a close look and see whether they have enough manpower. As regards to the website, yes, we will make it ready within this year. When the registration period starts, that is on the 1st of March next year, the website will be ready. With recognized units, we will put them on the website. That is, in the market, if your unit is not on this list on our website, that means your unit has not been recognized. There is no recognition granted yet. So the prospective tenants could check on this list. Any follow-up question, Dr. Hong? No? Thank you. Next, Mr. Cheng. Vincent Cheng. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Housing Department and the Housing Bureau for their hard work in the past 7 years when I first joined the LegCo, I remember that the first question I raised was about the housing condition of Hong Kong people. But at that time, we weren't very confident about how we could rectify the situation, especially at that time, the supply of public housing units were not that adequate. In the recent years, we have come to some consensus and we've become more and more confident. For instance, we have new schemes rolling out. We have transitional housing and also light public housing on the market. And also with the control of the rent, we also have a better situation. This kind of rental regulation is to protect the tenants. And we have spent a lot of effort to foster that as well. But then I think the core problem is about the quality of the subdivided flats. The rent may be controlled. It may be controlled at a reasonable level. It may even have gone down a bit. But then the quality of the subdivided flats have not been greatly improved. So I am in full support of this regulatory regime. I believe that it could help us solve these core problems. Well, that said, a lot of people have expressed a concern about whether the existing tenants of the subdivided flats would be affected by these by this regulatory regime. Well, especially for the singletons, especially the male singletons living in these SDUs. I'd like to know if the administration will take a close look at that as well, especially for the single elderly people living in the existing SDUs. Do you have any assistance policy to help them out? You mentioned about some waivers that are not included, for instance, in the industrial buildings and so forth. I'm worried that some people may perhaps move to live in this kind of industrial building. We have to make sure that their living condition will not be worsened under these regulatory regime. Yes. Mr. Chang is very clear about the problem, and he also is very clear about the a whole range of measures behind the regulation. So all these are essential. That's why we have sort of a network of policies and measures before we roll out these regulatory regime. For instance, we have different departments looking into the problem of people moving into industrial buildings. We have a working group headed by the Deputy Secretary that is evident that the government knows that a lot of these kind of problems have to be tackled by different departments. We have interdepartmental working group. We will look into the problem of the living conditions of the people and be careful of not letting people move downward to live in worse housing or living condition. For people, especially singletons living in the SDUs, we have left about 70% of the new units for the singletons, especially the single elderlies. We also have a point system. We don't want to see families with very young children or family with poor health living in substandard flats. So we have this kind of point system. We will add a bit more points to these underprivileged people so that they could move into a better living conditions earlier. Next, Mr. Lang Min Kwong. Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the administration for working very hard and rolling out different schemes to help people living in substandard SDUs. The secretary, and even the chief executive have visited people living in these substandard SDUs, and it shows that the government knows about the problem and knows about the imminence, or urgency to solve these problems. It actually affects many people, and it will have a long-lasting effect on the population as well. I'd like to ask about the future direction or a longer-term plan of the administration in solving these problems. Well, after the commencement of the regulatory regime, would the government leave it to the market to regulate the situation, or does the administration has the plan to reduce the numbers of SDUs in our society? If it's the latter, then I believe that our housing policies or different measures have to be adjusted. For instance, people waiting to get a PRH after moving onto PRH units, then there might still be some people who perhaps are not eligible to apply for PRH or who do not want to move into PRH. But then they might face financial problem that they can't afford the rental of the SDUs anymore. Does the administration have any plan to deal with these underprivileged people? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung. The BHU regulatory regime is to tackle the problem. We understand that there are people living in substandard SDUs. They may be waiting in a queue to get a unit of PRH. That's why they are temporarily living in substandard SDUs. Well, but on the other hand, we know that there are some SDUs that are of better quality. Some people, for instance, young people, may want to leave their parents and learn to become independent and want to live alone. And that could be the reason why they are living in SDUs. There might be other people who want to live closer to their workplace or closer to their children's schools, and that's why they are living in SDUs. But we, of course, hope that these people would be living in good quality SDUs. So with the regulatory regime, we are providing the minimum requirements of SDUs. We want to make sure that they have good ventilation, they have windows, so that there will not or no longer be any substandard SDUs in our society anymore in the future. We want to provide chances for people or different options for people to choose from. There could be different reasons for them to live in SDUs, but then what we want to do is to make sure that these SDUs in the market are of reasonable quality. With the regulatory regime, we hope that the SDUs would not be substandard anymore. We set out the minimum requirement. Well, the location of the SDUs are important as well. We know that there are great rent differences for SDUs in different locations. So these will be regulated by the market. Ms. Jofi Chen. Thank you, Chair. I remember in August 2021, I wasn't in the LegCo yet, and I believe at that time we were talking about how we could tackle the problem of people living in poor condition. And I'm very glad to see this. Finally, we have this regulatory regime coming into fruition soon. And I think that this bill has come out in time. We just hosted a visit of some university students to the LegCo, and I think that this is good news for our young people to know that the administration has the resolute to solve the housing problem of our population. We have different measures rolling out. Well, during the site visits to the SDUs, we found that many people do not have a clear understanding about these new policies or these new measures that will be coming out to help them. I know that there are care teams who will be explaining these to them. We also have elder people living in SDUs, and I hope that we could have more resources to take better care of these, especially the single elders living in SDUs, so that they know about this new policy coming out. For the DAB, we have always been looking into this problem, and we care about people, especially children living in the SDUs. We suggested that there should be a tenant registration scheme, but then it seems that this is not or has not been considered or by the administration in the recent bill. We hope that there will be a kind of basic data pool of the people living in SDUs so that the administration and relevant social work parties could be more focused in helping these people. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Chan. Yes, Ms. Chen, just met some university students from Beijing, and for myself, I just visited Lisbon, and in the audience, there were people asking about the condition in Hong Kong. There were questions about how the government would help out the people living in poor living conditions. Now with the BHU regulatory regime, we could answer these questions promptly and with confidence. We could tell people around the world that the Hong Kong government is resolute in solving our housing problem. Ms. Chen has stated a very valid question. For people now living in SDUs, there might be some elders and also households with young children or people who are underprivileged. Well, this is exactly the reason why we want to roll out this regulatory framework. We want our people to have more options, and we would better use our resources. We have the social or the common living rooms, or so that people could co-live and make use of these resources. This is, for instance, the community living rooms in place in society now. We hope that people could live in better quality SDUs with a reasonable rent. For households with children, yes, we would ask the tenants to give basic data about their family members living in the SDUs, and we will make use of these data to do better analysis. Thank you. Next, Ms. Doreen Kwong. Chair, I totally agree that we should solve the problem of our housing problem in Hong Kong. First, I'd like to ask, well, I have a few questions. I'm very glad to know that the existing SDUs will be enhanced upon. However, there will be a cost involved. I'd like to ask the Secretary the following. With the regime being rolled out, I'd like to ask if you have considered how much the rent of the SDUs will be raised after the regulatory regime has taken effect. Well, I don't think anybody will believe that there will not be any rent increase after the regime is in place. If there will be such an increase, I'd like to know if the Secretary has any estimation about how much it will increase. And we do have to make use of the power of the private market. Now that with the BHU system, the number of units provided by the private market will be reduced. That is natural. Well, I have visited some transitional housing. You also have different measures helping people to move into these TH or moving out from the TH. But will there be a problem that the units provided by private market will be reduced? However, at the same time, the government or the administration will have a heavier and heavier loading on its shoulder.
Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Doreen Kong. Now, of course, we would like to export this marvelous regime to other places to help them address the housing issue. Now, about the cost of alteration works. The rent level of SDU has risen to an average of $5,500. That's because of the lack of options. Many people who are waiting for PRH has to resort to the SDU market. That's why the rent level has been driven up. Now, in the future, we will have a total of 4 years transitional period. During that time, every year we will deliver some 30,000 public housing units per year, and another 30,000 under our light public housing regime. So tenants will have much more choices. So this year, compared with last year, year on year, we have seen a drop in the SDU market rent level. The overall private market has seen a rise in rent level, but that's the reverse for the SDU market. Now, in terms of alteration costs, it depends on how severe the situation is for each flat. Now, if the landlord has subdivided the flat into many flats, then of course the alteration cost would be higher. Now, if there are only 2 or 3 subdivided units and each of them is larger than 8 square meters, what the operator needs to do is just to install a ventilation fan and so on, and that would not be so hard. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I have 3 questions about the policy. But before that, I think we have had a lot of discussion on the relevant matters. Now, we have already put the arrow on the nuke. It is time we send the arrow flying. So I hope the government would be receptive to my observations and concerns on certain points. Now, I will first mention 2 points. Now, in terms of registration and recognition, the Secretary for Housing has the power to approve or reject the applications. And there is also an appeal mechanism. But there is not a deadline for the administration to make a decision. And also, there is not a specified period for the appeal board to consider each case. So such a period should be set. Now, about the protection of tenancy, 2 + 2, 4 years. Now, there are some provisions in the bill about the tenancy being automatically cancelled when the SDU is not registered or when the recognition is cancelled. So I wonder how that works. Now, in terms of demand and supply, let me tell you my observation. I fully agree with the government's approach. The government will deliver a large number of PRH units for those who are eligible for PRH, so it is the right time to launch the BHU regime. But in reality, according to what I've heard in council since 2021, there is still a certain percentage of SDU tenants who are not eligible for public housing. So they are also under rent pressure. So no matter how much you ramp up the supply of PRH housing, yes, with more supply, the rent per square foot would be lower. But the rental level of a SDU or a BHU, even after the improvements, is not comparable to a conventional flat. So, since landlords are profit-seeking, they would consider cost. There are several kinds of costs, for example, compliance costs and other costs. Mr. Andrew Lam, you can wait until the second or even the third round. I will invite the Secretary to reply to you first. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Lam. Now, the first point raised by Mr. Lam. How long will it take for us to consider each case of recognition and also appeal applications? Now, there are 8 minimum living conditions standards. They are clear. If the documents accompanying the application is sufficient and there are no statutory orders to impose on the flat, then we can offer the recognition within 15 days' time. In terms of appeal, I will invite my colleagues to consider specifying a period. Now, according to our research, there are some people who are not likely to be eligible to apply for a PRH because of their income, asset, or because they have property. They account for 40% of the SDU tenants. So the supply, with 80,000 units in supply, I think it is more than enough to meet the 40,000 potential applicants. Now, for SDU, the rental level can be very different if they are located on the top floor or lower floor, and whether there is lift. Now, sometimes for the convenience of the location also matters. If it is near a train station or MTR station, it will be more expensive. So we will let the markets to adjust the rents here. I remind members, since I'm going to entertain more rounds, so please leave more time for the Secretary and the officials to reply. Ms. Judy Chan. Thank you. I thank the Secretary for Housing and your team. I'm a member of the panel on housing. I have seen how much work your Bureau has done. Like public housing, transitional housing. Now, finally, we are scrutinizing the basic housing units. We look forward to eradicating substandard SDUs. So I thank the Secretary for accepting my suggestion of an early bird discount to encourage SDU operators to register their units earlier. Now, I would like to seek some clarification from the Secretary in terms of cost. The fee for recognition is not substantial, but that's not the case for alteration of the units. The Secretary has said that you're not worried about a rise in the rental level. On the contrary, you think the rents for BHU would drop. So can you explain your logic so that the public is reassured? Now, another thing which is not directly related to BHU, but it is also something related. Category C, applicants for PRH or light public housing units. For Category C applicants, can we give them more help? Now, as landlords of SDUs, they usually have more than one property for lease. Now, the landlord may decide to renovate Flat A to qualify for BHU, but they may raise the rents for their other properties to make up for the alteration costs. So the other two flags are not subject to the BHU. So those two flags, so the other flags, the other properties owned by the same landlord will not be helpful for Category C tenants. So can we give more help to tenants who may see a potential rise in their rent? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Chen. So I thank Ms. Chen for suggesting the early bird discount. Now, under our proposal, for the applicants who applied for registration in the first 3 years, out of the 4-year transitional period, they can have their registration fee waived for a few years. That means a lot of money saved. So we encourage operators to register their flags early. In terms of cost, as mentioned in the previous discussion, years ago, the landlord has spent some money to subdivide the flags. That's achievable. So I don't think the cost for restoring or modifying the flags will not be as high as when you first subdivided your flags. And those requirements are just minimum standards, headroom and floor area. We think 90% of the existing SDUs can fulfill those requirements with minor alterations. Now, as I said, when there are more options in the market, when a substantial amount of tenants have moved to transitional housing, light public housing, or even public residential housing, I think landlords might have difficulties finding tenants for their basic housing units. So there should be no question of rising rent. The situation now is very different from several years ago because of a large number of public housing units having been completed. So for those tenants who are affected by landlords who have indicated their intention to modify their flags, we will offer help to those affected tenants. Now, for tenants who are eligible for other form of housing, for example, transitional housing, the potential increase in rents will not impose any pressure on them because they have choices. Mr. Tony Jie, thank you. I support the government to adopt a pragmatic approach in dealing with the issue of SDU. The situation has existed for quite some time. The professional institutes I represent has concerns over certain standards under the bill because compared with other habitable flags, the standard is still a bit low. Still, we hope that in the foreseeable future we can finally eradicate substandard SDU. So I think this first step is applaudable. We are perfectionists, but we think at least this is a start, better than nothing. So as mentioned by Vincent Chang, I share the same concern that there are some other SDUs which are not covered by the regulatory regime, for example, those in commercial buildings or in industrial buildings. So Mr. Michael Wong, the Deputy Financial Secretary, chairs the working group, and the Secretary for Housing is the Deputy Chair. So I think you have to be consistent, because some tenants may choose to move to the other SDUs which are not covered by the BHG regime. Now, SDUs in industrial building are a huge problem, but we don't see any progress in tackling that issue. So I hope these governments would educate and tell the public that you are not tolerating those SDUs, but enforcing the law on the others. Now, from your PowerPoint presentation, there is a definition for subdivided units. Now, the definition includes the flats being enclosed and partition. So the definition for enclosed is up for interpretation. So I hope the definition for enclosed can be clearer so that there will not be any abuse. So the definition is two or more wholly or substantially enclosed compartments designed for each being the subject of a separate domestic tenancy. But there may be some workarounds. Now, sometimes only one out of several enclosed compartments is let out. So what will happen? Actually, Chairman, I support empowering the government to exercise discretion on handling these matters under the administrative-led approach. Secretary, now concerning the concerns of professional institutes, I think there has been a lot of discussion on the floor area. There were suggestions from 7 square meters to 10 square meters. So the professional institutes would like to aim higher and advise us to adopt a higher standard in terms of floor area. But we have considered the accessibility of society. If we set the floor area at 8 square meters, 50% or 10 square meters, 50% of the flats will be affected. If we are pitching it at 8 square meters, as in the bill, only one-fourth of the SDUs would be affected. So that's why we decided to set the minimum floor area at 8 square meters. Now, we do not allow residential units in industrial buildings or commercial buildings. So the situation is regulated by leases. Our departments will continue to enforce the law, and the working group chaired by Mr. Michael Wong will continue to coordinate the enforcement effort. Now, in terms of the term enclosed, we specify that requirements because smoke separation is important. When there is fire in a subdivided unit, we have to make sure that there is no smoke escaping into the corridor. So the purpose of enclosure is to seal off smoke. So with that in mind, I think the professionals can understand what our requirement is.
就話我
Secretary, my concern is people may say that, well, we have not enclosed the compartment, so it will not be regulated. Now, in terms of the definition, is the other way round. We don't want people to abuse our loopholes, so our definition will be rather tight. For instance, those of sliding doors cannot be used as a loophole to evade our regulation. We are going to make our definition for BHUs very tight. As regards the tenancies, now if these people are strangers to one another, and then if they share one tenancy agreement in order to evade our regulation, the possibility is very low. So if you expect two strangers to come under one tenancy agreement, then there is liability concern. We don't believe that this is going to happen. If we talk about a group of university students that are very civic-minded, and they are willing to share the liability of other students without any advantage concerned, that is acceptable. We want to regulate principal tenants and also agents. They will come under our regulation. Thank you. May I remind members to leave time for the administration to answer as much as possible, because if we have members overrun, then it's not fair to other members. All right, we have two more members, Mr. Wai Kwok and also Ms. Starry Lee. Thank you, Chair. The reason why we have SDUs is all because of market forces. I've said more than once here, my childhood experience when I was a primary student, I lived in a tenement unit in Kowloon City with partitioned rooms and also bed space apartments. Back then, there was no SDUs, there was no conversion of the kitchen and the toilet. Households share the use of the kitchen and a bathroom in one residential unit. There was no argument because I didn't have to go to work. I would give way to people who had to rush to work or to school. I fetched a basin of water back to my unit for morning washing. But then we were able to live together harmoniously. We shared one kitchen. We were willing to share our food as well with our neighbors. But times have changed. You really can't expect people to live together in one residential unit in that manner. As a result, we have SDUs, one flat being divided into smaller units with their own kitchens and bathrooms. And that has given rise to inadequate housing. Because if the housing condition is poor, then the rent is lower. There are really people who cannot afford higher rent. I already expressed my view that you are too optimistic. Some people can really afford SDUs with standalone kitchen and also windows. I'm pleased to see that the administration has adjusted their minimum requirements. So, for instance, how do you define a proper windows? We have to think twice. When I was a kid, I was happy to have a room with a window, regardless of whether it faced the light well or not. And then in an earlier housing panel meeting, I said that for having category C tenants for TH, that is, if people are displaced from SDUs, they should be given priority in allocating TH. That's a good policy, but then it is not just this policy bureau. Other policy bureaus will have to consider why elderly persons have opted for SDUs. Why aren't they eligible for PRH? There are various reasons, and the complaints division of LegCo have seen or received many such complaints. All policy bureaus, including social institutions, should see how we can help elderly singletons so that we can have a better resolution of this problem. I don't really expect a lengthy reply. All right, thank you, Secretary. A brief reply, please. Thank you, Dr. Low, for sharing with us his personal experience. Nowadays, people have standalone units, and children are rather lonely. They live in small units with no friends, and therefore we encourage people to move to LPH or TH operated by non-profit-making organizations so that children have company as they grow up. We do understand that there are various reasons for singletons to live in SDUs. For instance, for TH, we have Cat C tenants. If it is the assessment of social workers that there is genuine housing need, we do accept application from Cat C tenants. So by means of additional public housing modes such as LPH and TH, we hope to be able to help more tenants or more people out there. Ms. Sari Lee. Well, I have mixed feelings in joining this BC. I started to serve the Kowloon City District Council in the year 2000. It's been more than 20 years since. Kowloon City is a community with the greatest number of SDUs. We started off with not that many, and then very soon older buildings have been converted to SDUs, and that has given rise to structural problems as well as water seepage problem. The administration's response when we asked for regulation was SDUs came into being because of social needs. Now, according to the paper, there are 110,000 SDUs involving 220,000 inhabitants. I might not be the first to witness the growth or the emergence of SDUs, but at least we have more than 200,000 households living in SDUs. I have to commend the CE as well as the current term of government for the courage and also the commitment to eradicate SDUs. We once held a press conference with Mr. Vincent Chow. We talked about the difficulties in eradicating SDUs given that there are already so many in the market. If we started when they first arose, it was easier, but now we have more than 200,000 households living in SDUs. Regulation is extremely difficult. So I'm really appreciate your courage and commitment. It's not easy for the government to take up such a burden, given that we have more than 200,000 households living in SDUs, and you can imagine the complications. Well, from the announcement and the policy address to the bill now, I understand that the Secretary has been working very hard to engage different sectors, and they are being more flexible in the proposals. At first, I was worried that if all SDUs had to have windows, that would be a big issue. I visited the SDUs in my district and I knew it was difficult. So I want to thank the Secretary for her efforts in housing the community, but please be pragmatic. You may not be able to achieve your goals in a very short period of time. Now we have SDUs all because of the housing need of grassroots. So we expect owners to spend money in alterations, and rents may be driven up as a result. So will SDU inhabitants be driven to even more inadequate housing? The first I talked about coffin type units, housing units, was in 2011. How can you ensure that our grassroots will not be really displaced because of your efforts? Because online we heard about people living in places where there was rodent infestation. Secretary, thank you. Yes, starting from, you talked about your experience starting from 2000. I can feel your sentiments, and I thank you for not underestimating the difficulties. Now, we must thank political parties for showing us the real picture, and you took us to different scenes to look at the real situation. Now, it is our decision to require windows to be included in BHUs, even though it might face a light well, because we don't want people to live in coffin type units anymore. If there is no window in a BHU, then really people will be living in a coffin-like situation. So we thank members for helping us to set up this very pragmatic regulatory regime. Of course, we don't want our grassroots to continue to live in very inadequate housing situation. In the coming 4 years, we have other options. We have different types of PRH, and we have a new category C tenant in TH. And of course, we must step up publicity and public education. Some people may, in the lower stratum, may be very hard working, and they are not aware of the additional choices. They might just give up after visiting one offer under TH. In fact, we have 30 to 40 TH projects in hand. So if someone doesn't like the offer in a TH, there will still be other options, and therefore we should use moves like community living rooms, and we should also mobilize social work teams to help different households and to give them help as appropriate. Publicity and help to individual cases are important, and will continue to do this. Thank you. Now we start the second round of discussion with respect to the policy issues. Reverend Peter Douglas Goon. Thank you, Chair. The administration answered my question in terms of the long-term housing strategy, but I don't think the Secretary has talked about the long-term affordability of our housing policy. I'd like to know the financial aspect of our policy. Many people are now allocated public housing, but then the rent is on the low side. How will the administration cope with that? Yes, there was a similar question from Ms. Doreen Kwong as well. Thank you. I did have time to address this issue. Under our long-term housing policy, members may recall that public housing includes both public rental housing and subsidized sales flats, such as green form housing and HOS flats, for instance. Now, we charge $2,500 per flat in PRH on average. That is hardly sufficient to cover repair and maintenance. But then we've also got subsidized sales flats. We have to control the costs very strictly because the price is not packed to the private level, but rather to the affordability of the applicants. While we control costs, we can also recover part of it by the sale of flats. This is a very important element in ensuring the affordability. In the past, 70% were PRH and 30% SSF. As mentioned in the last policy address, in the coming 10 years, in the later part of the next decade, we're going to make it a 60-40 mix, 60% being PRH and 40% SSF. So we have a greater portion of flats sold. We will have a better revenue, better income to ensure the health of our finances. Thank you. Any supplement? No more. Mr. Kenneth Low. Thank you. We heard a lot from the Secretary's reply that our LPH and TH can be a fallback plan for inhabitants of SDUs displaced in this exercise. All right, we understand that we have enough LPH and the occupation is about 85%. I think we have about 3,000 units remained for rehousing. So we have about 5,000 to 6,000 LPH units. You also explained to us how you're not worried that the land of LPH will be recovered by developers. But my question is whether you have sufficient vacant units to cope with the demand. And we understand that you're going to set up an appeals committee to look after appeals. I think members of the appeal committee should be knowledgeable. They have to assess whether the alteration works has been properly done. Will you have sufficient professionals to sit on the appeal panel? Because you also talk about people who have building or legal knowledge. Well, in addition to the supply of professionals, you have to consider that there are more SDUs in districts like Kowloon City and Sam Shui Po. Will you have sufficient manpower to cope with the need? Secretary, thank you. Mr. Leung, we talked about why we are confident enough to introduce the BHU bill now. We have adopted a phase-by-phase approach. We have a 1-year registration period and 3-year grace period. That means 4 years in total. That will buy time to ensure that we have sufficient options for affected residents as a result. For instance, in districts with more SDUs, there will be more community living rooms as a result. Community living rooms are good places to educate the public, and they are being operated by excellent operators, some of which are also operating LPH and TH for us, so they can provide through train service for affected residents. So we will approach our NGOs and we will build up our social work teams to help cases that require our help. As regards the appeal panel, it will have one chairman and at least 2 members. In addition, we need panel members with legal knowledge, and we also need professionals. We talk about architects, surveyors, and also engineers involved in the recognition mechanism. They will have excellent professional judgment and expertise to help us to deal with appeals.
Mr. Lam and Kwong, thank you, Chair. Following on my first question, I'd like to say that I hope that the market of SDUs in the market will eliminate the substandard units. My follow-up question is as follows. In the SDU market, there might be one landlord who has a lot of SDU units, or there might be some elder landlord who has only 1 unit. He or she may live in one of the rooms and let out the rest of the rooms in the unit to other tenants. Well, they have to perhaps put in some money to enhance the existing unit so that their flat could could meet the minimum standards of the administration. Well, some people might worry that these kind of landlord may charge higher rents after they've put in money to renovate their flat. Do you have any assistance for landlords, especially elderly landlords, facing this kind of financial problem? And also, do you have any sample standardized or sample SDUs so that these landlords could just sort of make use of this standard to seek help for alteration works? This is also a way to protect the tenants so that they would not suffer from higher rent. It would also avoid having the SDUs being controlled in the hands of major developers or major landlords. Or that is, in implementing the regulatory regime, would the administration look at the actual situation in the market and try to introduce more focused assistance to those in need? Thank you, Chair. Secretary? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung. Mr. Leung has given a very good suggestion. We will bring it back to further consider and try to locate suitable units so that we could come up with the so-called sample SDUs. We understand that some elderly landlords may still have the kind of old concept of what an SDU should be. But then now we have new materials, for building, for instance, that could achieve achieve a good result. For instance, it could be a good partition panel, but then it's soundproof and so forth. So we hope that we could come up with some standard or sample SDUs for reference of the landlords. For instance, the choice of materials and also the price range and so forth. All these could be shared with the existing landlords. Mr. Rincon, thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask about some more questions in detail, for instance, regarding government policy. In the BHU bill, in Article 11 to 14, it mentions about the grace period and also the recognition or the registration period. I understand that after registration, the administration will conduct site visits, and there might be the possibilities of the cancellation of a registration. If the unit is not altered up to the minimum requirement or standard of the administration. I'd like to ask the Secretary, as you provide a grace period, how come you are so stringent in checking the registered flats? If they do not carry out alteration works or the necessary alteration works, you may cancel their registration. What are the rationale behind this measure? And also, in the bill, there are mentions about the imminent threat to people or the property. Under such a situation, the recognition could be cancelled. And if that is the case, the landlord has to compensate the tenants. What about natural disasters? What about if these kind of situation is caused by natural disasters? It's force majeure. It's not caused by the landlord for not carrying out necessary alteration works. What would you do? Third question about professional recognition or recognition by the professionals. I understand that these professionals have to conduct site visit and to see whether the alteration works can meet the minimum requirement of the regulation. Well, what if the professionals, would it be possible for the professionals to send out his or her assistants to do this kind of site visit? Thank you, Ms. Kong. About registration and the arrangement of grace period. Under normal circumstances, during the grace period, we probably would not cancel the registration. But then we have to leave some flexibility here. For instance, if the building itself has some structural threat or very serious defects or structural defects, in that case, we have to be very careful. If the building itself has some structural hazard, then the registration for the individual units within that building has to be cancelled. Well, for other circumstances, for instance, if the housing department has issued a alteration notice, we would then carry out actions to cancel the registration of the SDU. For professional recognition, we do understand that the professional may be very busy and sometimes they may not be able to conduct site visit in person every time. So actually it is for the professionals to bear the professional responsibility. He or she could ask some assistance or his staff in his professional companies to conduct the site visit. Well, as long as he signed on the paper, it shows that a proper site visit has been conducted, and it is certain that the internal or the structural situation of the units could meet the minimum requirement of the administration. So we trust the professional judgment of the professional people. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the BHU bill, what is the relation between this bill with the existing tenant protection regulation? We talk about supply and demand. My major concern is for the people who have no choice. Well, some people, they could have different options. For instance, there may be some people who are not eligible to apply for PRH. However, we understand that in society there are some people who have no choice. They have no resources. There might be singletons who could not be allocated a PRH unit in the short run. They have to wait perhaps in a long queue. So I'm most concerned about this group of people. I hope we would not overlook the needs of this group of people. In 2026, the census, the population census, would give us the opportunity to grasp the real situation in society. I hope that the administration could make use of this opportunity to know in further detail about the actual situation of different groups of people who have housing needs. Well, for transitional housing, TH, I think it provides great flexibility for the administration. But I understand that by 2030, there will be about only 10,000 units of TH left. I agree with the Secretary that there might be some units that have to be replaced in due course. But are we so sure that there will still be 70,000 or 80,000 units left in the market after the enhancement? Well, this is the just the numbers that you projected. But then, what about the landlords? Will they continue to operate the SDUs? They might consider the cost and also the opportunity cost and so forth. For instance, within one same building, if the rental has risen for 8%, but then the rent for SDUs has dropped by 2%. So within the same building, would the landlord of the units consider not operating SDUs? They could just rent out the entire unit as one unit because the rent might be better. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Well, in the long run, if we have PRH, we also have TH with categories A and B. We also will have category C. We also have LPH. We will accord priorities to people who are in more urgent need for an LPH unit. So there are options available. And also with category C, TH tenants, I believe that we could cover the majority of the people in need. What about for some who are illegal immigrants in Hong Kong waiting to be deported? Well, they are illegal immigrants. Our principle is that government or public money should be spent on local residents. For these people, the IIs who are living in Hong Kong for the time being, we do have social work department taking care of them and looking for suitable housing for them during the interim period. So we do have different measures taking care of different group of people in society. There might be households with family members who are not living in Hong Kong, who might be living across the border. So we also have different measures to take care of the needs of children of these households. But then for our housing resources, we should spend on local residents. We will have the third round for raising questions. Please wait in queue. Well, it's just a follow-up question. I think the Secretary has not answered my question about the existing bill and the landlord and tenants regulation. All right, the Secretary. Oh, Ms. Wong. Thank you, Chair. In the we have 2+2 tenancy regulation to protect the tenants. Well, if, for instance, a housing department has to exercise action on a certain unit, then the 2+2 tenancy protection regulation would be superseded. And for the BHU, if there are safety hazards, then the tenants have to move out. So in the future, after a BHU is registered or recognized, then under very extreme situation, for instance, if there are imminent safety hazards, the Secretary for Housing could issue a notice to cancel the tenancy or cancel the recognition. There will be a notice, a period of not less than 30 days, so that the tenants, we would give time for the tenants to arrange moving out. We will also have social work team helping them to solve their imminent housing problem. Well, so under this situation, the 2+2 tenancy protection will not be valid, but then we will have different measures taking care of these people. Mr. Vincent Chang, thank you, Chair. I'd like to follow up on my question that I raised in the previous round. Well, just now, Ms. Darry Lee mentioned about an incident in June 2011. We discovered some coffin-like flats, and we asked the administration how they would deal with this problem. And the fine is, or the penalty is in place. For instance, that could lead to an imprisonment of 2 years. For people operating these kind of coffin-like units. We, of course, don't want to see underprivileged people who have to resort to living in this kind of inadequate housing condition. For the relevant regulations, the Secretary mentioned that some other regulations will be adjusted if this BHU regulatory regime is in place. Well, I understand that there had not been a lot of fines imposed. At that time, they mentioned that they had to form a housing license working group that had to conduct site visit, but then they faced with different kinds of problems. For instance, they were not allowed access to the units, and they couldn't carry out investigation or inspection properly. Well, in the future, will the same problems arise? Because you will need additional people, are you going to form a special task force to conduct site visits? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Cheng, for your follow-up question. I understand that relevant departments are still carrying out site visits. From 2021 to 2025, end of May, they have conducted 1,843 site visits, and there were 6 cases that had to face penalty. So from that, we could see that the administration is still very resolute in carrying out these measures properly. And for the bed space apartments, under the bed space apartments ordinance, I believe that the relevant departments will continue to carry out inspection and also regulatory action. Well, when we have been kept informed about their work progress. What about in the future? Are they still to be is this a group still to be responsible for carrying out site visits? The Secretary or Ms. Wong? For the enforcement of the BHU regulation, we have our own team, and for the bed space regulation, it would be under the housing department, and if it's related to it will be other departments taking care of other problems. We have 2 more colleagues waiting for the second round and 2 more for the third round to raise questions. Let's break for 15 minutes now, and then after resuming, we will continue with our question and answer time. Will the Secretary perhaps leave for a while? We will resume after a 15-minute break. Thank you.